What are the 5 worst decisions you can make in the base game of Elden Ring? Whilst the Land Between is packed with mostly independent bosses and activities, there are plenty of instances and questlines where it's all too easy to royally screw up, from locking you out of content to destroying the world in a frenzied blaze. So let's take a look at 5 of the downright worst choices you can make in this game. Up first, definitely the simplest entry on this list, is a mistake many people make early on in the game relating to Fia the Deathbed Companion, a woman whom we can lay next to, receive a warm hug from, and an item called Baldashin's Blessing, which, at the cost of a little FP, will boost poise and physical damage negation for 15 seconds when used. However, laying with Fia also comes with a hidden caveat, in that after doing so, our total health will drop by 5%, a debuff that of course becomes increasingly serious the more we level up, and which the game never explicitly warns you about. I may or may not have gone through at least one playthrough with this debuff accidentally left on, but if anyone asks, I'm just hardcore, so it doesn't really affect me. So, if you want to understand just why Fia affects us so when we lay with her, you need to understand the purpose of a deathbed companion, something Fia herself will explain midway through her questline.
I was known as a deathbed companion. Where I come from, after I received the warmth and lively vigor from a number of champions, I lay with the remains of an exalted noble. To grant him another chance at life, to do so is the purpose of my being.
So, Fia's role isn't so much to serve as a companion to us, but rather, it sounds as though her laying with us is done at the cost of a small portion of our life force. Presumably after laying with enough champions and bestowing them with Baldashin blessings, Fia would have enough life to grant it anew to her exalted noble. Though she does explain that before she could complete this purpose, the guidance of grace awakened her and led her to a new one. That's presumably becoming the companion of Godwyn, Prince of Death, bringing us on to her main questline. But, in spite of the slightly altered rules regarding those who live in death, Fia will still sap away our life force through the power of hugs. The way to remove this debuff, though, is fortunately quite simple. Just use Baldashin's Blessing. I mean, you can save it for a moment where the buffs might be handy just before a fight, but unless you want to keep taking that 5% health hit, you'll want to use it pretty soon after laying with Fia. If you lay with her again, the process will repeat, and you'll have to use the blessing again. This can be done an unlimited number of times until reaching a certain point in her questline. So, turns out that yes, sadly, the softly spoken woman wanting to lay with you is indeed too good to be true. Kind of. Not a problem though, so long as you understand what her game is. That said, I can tell you from experience that walking this dangerous land and even beating the likes of promised consort Radahn with the debuff unknowingly on does feel 5% more impressive than not. But, just like the Land Between, the internet is a realm teeming with danger, striking at the moments you least expect. Though, rather than losing runes, which you can run back to if you're careful, you risk permanently losing your data, like passwords and personal info. Therefore, one of the worst decisions you can make when browsing the internet is not using NordVPN. You see, NordVPN masks your IP address, making it impossible for anyone to track you and steal your precious data. It's still like playing Elden Ring, the dangers are all still out there around you, it's just that now none of them can see, much less attack you. Also, with NordVPN's dark web monitor, I could scan all 7 of my email addresses and everything they've ever signed up for, alerting me to any past data breaches and passwords that needed changing, safeguarding your past, present, and future internet activity to turn browsing into a peaceful stroll through Marika's Shaman village, rather than, say, dodging and diving recklessly through Miquella's Halic tree. Go to nordvpn.com/Sambram to get a 2-year plan plus 4 extra months for free, and that also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there really is nothing to lose by checking it out. Now, there aren't too many out-and-out nice NPCs in Elden Ring. Most people have hidden motives and seek to use you to suit their own ends one way or another. No doubt, part of this is by design to have more fights in the game, or just to add to the often tragic way that events turn out. But one NPC that doesn't have a bad bone in his body is the demi-human named Bock the Seamster, or initially Bock the Tree, as that's how we first find him in the Limgrave starting area, right by the first telescope and no doubt surrounded by messages. It's not clear how long Bock's been a tree, but by the time we free him, it seems he'd almost forgotten that he was one. Yet, he's so grateful after we free him and desperately wants to repay us with something of value. Unfortunately, this involves Bock sneaking back into a cave he was already cast out from by the other demi-humans, with the return also not going so well. Once again, a little to the west, it adorably falls to us to go in and get what was meant to be our own reward: a set of tailoring tools and a sewing needle, things which once belonged to Bock's mum and now serve as his prized possessions. So now, doubly indebted to us, Bock will follow us on our journey, cropping up again at the start of the Liurnia region with the offer to make adjustments to our garments, and the simple request that we allow him to do so when possible, rather than attempting to ourselves. Now, adjusting garments most often means simply adding or removing parts of them, reducing the weight of the thing at the cost of stats to try and obtain a lighter load, perhaps. Now, there's no difference in quality between ours and Bock's alterations, but it's still absolutely worth using Bock, as doing so is free, whereas for us to alter them will cost runes. Plus, it makes Bock feel close to his mother, and I presume therefore happy, so there's that. And the way that he sweetly makes these requests is just adorable. Hell, even Melina, who seems to take little interest in much outside of the main quest, will comment on Bock's presence, encouraging us to speak with him when we can, and suggesting that all he wants is to be loved, to feel wanted and valued.
Your seamster, Bock. He is always eager to see your return. Please, will you talk to him? When you can. I'm sure he would be much contented.
Bock's questline reaches its final act when we arrive at the capital of Leyndell. Just inside the East Capital Rampart grace site, Bock will appear yet again, enamored by the beauty and majesty of the Erd Tree. Now, to progress the questline further, at this point will require two things. Firstly, a piece of demigod remembrance armor, for instance Radahn's obtained from Enya at the Round Table Hold, and the gold sewing needle and tailoring tools of Radagon. These are found in a chest at the Church of Vows, and are said to have been tooled brought by Radagon when marrying into the Carian royal family, perhaps both literally and figuratively stitching up the rift formed between Caria and the Golden Order. Alas, as far as Bock's quest goes, we simply need it to enable him to adjust some armor of the gods, after which the final choice and potentially worst decision we can make at the end of his quest will open. But to preface the tragedy of this thing, after giving him the golden sewing tools, Bock's complete and utter faith in us the Tarnished is made abundantly clear. He wholeheartedly believes that we will ascend to the Elden Throne, so much so that even at this point on our journey, he begs to call us Lord. A kindly Lord for a better age, he says. Now, I don't actually think that's quite the case for any of the potential 6 endings, and we'll explore that more in Chapter 4, but endings aside for a second, it's clear that Bock now trusts anything we say. So, when he brings up how disgusted he is at his demi-human ugliness, it leads him to ponder on the notion of being reborn. Now, Bock has heard stories that Rennala of Raya Lucaria has the power to rebirth her sweetings anew via the use of larval tears. Bock, of course, has no access to such a thing, and thus is forced to continue lamenting his own existence. However, when we, his kindly and generous lord, present Bock with the tool needed for his rebirth, one of our scavenged larval tears, he is overjoyed, not so much for his own sake, but more so that he won't feel embarrassed in our presence, assuming his lord is also disgusted by how he looks.
It was my only wish that I might honor you with a decent appearance.
With that, our generous seamster heads off to Rennala for his rebirth, only with one key item missing, and by the time we arrive at the top of the academy, it's already happened. Bock now appears fully human, a golden child kneeling in reverence to his now queen mother, and seemingly no longer able to speak, or, when reloading the area, no longer able to live. Now, had we studied Rennala's Great Rune of the Unborn more closely, or just phase 1 of her boss fight to be fair, then we would know that children born anew by Rennala are all frail and short-lived, imperfect beings each and all. Bock's rebirth may have temporarily fixed his physical appearance, but it also cursed him with an incredibly fleeting lifespan. Only us, the Tarnished, bolstered by the power of the Great Rune of the Unborn, can possibly undergo rebirth without falling prey to this defect. We, therefore, gave Bock the ability to be reborn, but not the one to keep on living afterwards. We rewarded our adorable and devoted seamster with death, and we did it under the guise that it truly was the ultimate reward. Thus, one of the most wholesome storylines in Elden Ring becomes now one of the most tragic, thanks to either our cruelty or, more likely, our negligence. So, jumping back to the room in Leyndell, we can instead give Bock nothing, but in this case, he'll still be embarrassed by his appearance, setting off on his own, probably to still find a Larval tear, and probably still end up dead. His fate's more up in the air with this one, of course, but we still tragically lose our loyal seamster. So, for the best ending, you'll want to head to the Volcano Manor region through the Seathwater Terminus and around to the other side of the mountains to the Hermit Village, which is also full of demi-humans. Most likely the region where Bock grew up, or at any rate lived at some point, and where we can now find an echo of his mother's voice, the "You're beautiful" prattling pate. Using this instead in Bock's vicinity will remind him of the one person in the world who thought he was beautiful, just the way he is. And with such a reminder of his mother's unconditional love, we, his lord, can now extend that love. Bock no longer feels the pressure to change his appearance on our behalf, and is content to remain as he is, in both reverence and service to us. It's one of the closest things we can get to a happy ending in this game, yet at the same time can go so truly, tragically, and terribly wrong. Nepheli Loux, warrior, is both a Tarnished, same as us, and the adopted daughter of Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing. She also, given her name, is no doubt a relative of Loux, warrior, better known in these lands as Godfrey, first Elden Lord. Though, given she may later face Godfrey in battle, it's clear the relationship between the two of those is not amicable. However, in order to get to that late stage, Nepheli has to first avoid a more gruesome fate, a fate left in our hands to potentially deliver. But jumping back, we first meet Nepheli Loux in Stormvale Castle, a ways before the fight against Godric the Grafted, and she too will be able to join in battle against him. Afterwards, impressed by our skill as a fellow warrior, Nepheli will immediately prove to be a friend, gifting the Arsenal charm, claiming it fair that we should have it as we defeated Godric. Later, she'll show up at the village of the Albinaurics, where her father, or adopted father, Gideon, has ordered the place ransacked, in search of one half of the Halig Tree Medallion. At this point, Nepheli Loux proves once again to be one of the nicer and more honourable characters in this world. Not simply acting as her father's lackey, she is in fact disgusted by Gideon's unchecked murder, pillaging, and oppression of the weak. Up until this point, Nepheli always thought her adopted father to be a kind man, and since especially she doesn't seem to know about the Halig Tree Medallion, she just doesn't get why Gideon would ever do this. This also makes her one of the few people not to straight up hate Albinaurics in this world, actually serving as a true and worthy defender of all the downtrodden, even those said to be graceless. So, confronting her father with the knowledge of what he'd done, Gideon Ofnir coldly cast aside his adopted daughter, banishing her to the lower levels of the Round Table Hold and offering his guidance no more. There, Nepheli Loux could be found kneeling, more conflicted and alone than she must have ever been since coming to these lands. She's now questioning Gideon's actions, yet still yearns for his guidance, and ultimately berates herself for having lost it in the first place. And it is in this vulnerable state that Nepheli now looks to us, her new, but perhaps now only remaining friend for even a hint of help. And here we have two options. The good one is taking the sending gate at the precipice of anticipation at the Four Belfries, returning us to the starting area of the game with the grafted scion, and retrieving up above the ashes of the Stormhawk King, an ancient sovereign of Stormvale that refuses to be summoned. Useless to us, yet presenting it to Nepheli, it turns out to be the exact pick-me-up that she needs, reminding her of her past where she once had a hawk of her own, and cheering her spirits enough to get up and keep going. And if we help Nepheli to take this path, then she will eventually go on to become heir of Stormvale, again implying her shared relation to Godric and Godfrey, and through the kindness and compassion she's displayed thus far, no doubt proving a far better candidate to rule than Godric. In fact, she even lends her aid fighting Godfrey, as I mentioned earlier, and all around spells out far better future prospects, for the Limgrave region at least, of the Lands Between. But there's also a far darker future that may come to pass if we allow ourselves to become the assistant to a cruel and ambitious sorcerer. After reaching Rani's Rise through Caria Manor to continue her questline, we'll be introduced to Saluvis, possibly the most condescending character in the game, but one who does invite us to meet face to face in his tower afterwards. And though he seemingly never expected us to actually take him up on this offer, to do so will unlock an alternate conclusion to Nepheli's questline.
Perhaps I'll give you something to do. I'd like you to find a woman called Nepheli to administer a potion. Even you can do that much, can't you?
Now, what Saluvis gives us here is by no means good for Nepheli, and in, or rather under, a building nearby, we can discover Saluvis' less than innocent little hobby, which involves snatching the bodies of others and seemingly disassociating their bodies from their souls in order to create spirit puppets. Though, if we call Saluvis out having discovered his little secrets, he will happily sell the puppets to us, suggesting it's not so much the spirits serving as the objects of his fascination, but rather their bodies. Kind of like a kid with an insect collection, but it's a grown man with a collection of people. So why specifically does he want Nepheli Loux as well? Perhaps it's for the strength of her spirit, or perhaps he wishes to corrupt her innocently heroic outlook on things, or maybe he simply wants her body for more base purposes. Regardless of the reason, it's entirely within our power to carry out this thing, coming to Nepheli at her lowest point in life to offer what she believes to be medicine, but which instead sends her into a deep slumber from which she will never truly awaken. Now, there is some tangible benefit to this, in that we can eventually get the Nepheli puppet for ourselves later during Saluvis' quest, either from himself or Pidia in Caria Manor nearby, but also note we don't have to do this to Nepheli to progress Saluvis' quest. If before giving Nepheli the potion we instead speak to Gideon, he will, again coldly, tell us that we can do whatever we want to her, but that whilst he no longer has use for Nepheli himself, she still has a lot more potential than serving as a puppet. And lore-wise, yes, that is absolutely true, she's the heir to Stormvale, but in fairness, gameplay-wise, being our puppet summon will on balance offer more throughout the game than anything else. Though we can, after speaking to Gideon, simply lie to Saluvis, still getting his remaining puppet summons and keeping Nepheli alive. So really, she is the only reward for doing this. And when we consider the eternal torment to both body and mind that one of the only out-and-out good characters in Elden Ring will be made to suffer, it easily becomes one of the most abhorrent and downright evil decisions that one can make in this game. Out of all 6 endings in Elden Ring, one of them by far comes off worst for the Lands Between, based on the fact that it utterly obliterates the Lands Between. Now, I would bet when you clicked this video that the Frenzied Flame probably popped into your head. And yes, embracing the 3 fingers and becoming Lord of Frenzied Flame does go against everything that the game otherwise encourages. But just how evil is the Flame of Frenzy, really? The Lands Between itself, as well as the Greater Will and the Golden Order, are by no means the paragons of virtue that they make themselves out to be. We know from Shadow of the Erdtree that Marika betrayed and systematically eliminated the Hornsent people in vengeance for what they did to her village, but then, to preserve the sanctity of her Golden Order, she hid away this entire region as well as her own son. We also know from this DLC that the 2 fingers, said to be direct envoys of the Greater Will, have actually had no communication with it for a long time, instead informing and acting acting without any guidance from the thing they pretend to be speaking to. The Three Fingers and Flame of Frenzy then offer an alternative to this terrible world, and I think Hyetta sums it up pretty well.
All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
So Hyetta claims that because this world is in actuality rife with imperfections, the best thing to do would be to strip it all away and start again. Return the world to its initial state as a writhing mass of total chaos, with us serving as the harbinger of doom. Now, it's not fully clear what, if anything, would then emerge from this state, and what the world would look like after. We can look to places like the Abyssal Woods, comprised of sealed away frenzied flame, for maybe some idea. And let's be honest, if the entire world was anything like the Abyssal Woods, then it would be horrible. It's literally the only region of the game, in fact, that I can't bring myself to fully explore. Though, even the Abyssal Woods were also once a lush forest, and were corrupted by the Flame of Frenzy, not made by it. Indeed, in all likelihood, us reigning as the Lord of Frenzied Flame could just spell the end of everything, forever. Something which Melina too seems to believe, as she begs us not to do this.
If you intend to claim the frenzied flame, I ask that you cease. It is not to be meddled with. It is chaos, devouring life and thought unending. However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures. Births continue. There is beauty in that, is there not? If you would become Lord, do not deny this notion. Please, leave the frenzied flame alone.
Again, devouring life and thought unending suggests that nothing further will be born from this chaos, that it'll forever take the world. And whilst the likes of Shabriri will prod and goad us into embracing the Three Fingers, citing even that we should do it for the sake of saving Melina, it's clear that Melina herself wants nothing more than to serve as the kindling to light the Erd Tree aflame. And if we do inherit Frenzy, we immediately lose Melina anyway, who departs with this cold but badass warning.
And remember, should you rise as the Lord of Chaos, I will kill you. As sure as night follows day, such is my duty. For allowing you the strength of runes. Goodbye, my companion. Goodbye, Torrent.
Easily one of the coolest lines in the whole game, but to be fair, inheriting the Frenzied Flame is the only viable option for saving Melina. Again, it's not what she wants, but for all of these simps, fans out there who can't bring themselves to do it, we then must become the kindling with the Frenzied Flame. And even afterwards, through the convoluted process of completing Millicent's questline and defeating Melania below the Halig Tree, good luck, to acquire Miquella's Needle, which then needs to be taken to the Storm Beyond Time in Farum Azula, where we fight Placidusax, it is possible to use this needle for warding away the meddling of outer gods. In this case, the Chaos God behind the Three Fingers, to subdue our Frenzied Flame, cheating fate and once again opening up the other endings as possibilities. Canonically, Melina will remain alive, but sadly, we still will never get to see her again. There's no thank you for defying the odds and finding a way to burn the Erd Tree, keep me alive, and not destroy the world in the process. Well done. There's none of that. However, in the event that we do become Lord of Frenzied Flame, there is still some hope left for the world, if Melina is indeed still alive by the end, where she once again reiterates her promise to hunt us down as far as we may go, in order to deliver unto us a fragment of destined death, a permanent death to ensure the world does continue, and isn't engulfed in frenzy. Now, she seems pretty adamant that she will succeed in this, so much so that whilst this is a destructive ending, I believe the only way to definitively destroy the entire world permanently, and therefore the actual worst decision we can make here, is to first allow Melina to die by burning the Erd Tree, and only then inherit the Flame of Frenzy, making sure to never subdue it in the storm beyond time, and now, with nothing and no one to stop us, may chaos take the world. Speaking of destined death though, the final worst decision you can make in Elden Ring is unleashing that Rune of Death way too early. Beast Clergyman / Maliketh the Blackblade is a boss you won't fight until very late into the game, at the far end of the crumbling Farum Azula region. Yet, to do so, and to win, will plunge us into the endgame state, where, most notably, the royal capital of Leyndell is transformed into Leyndell Capital of Ash. This will ultimately make most of the loot above ground completely unavailable to collect anymore, and it can also prevent you from completing Goldmask's questline if you're not up to speed on that, thus locking you out of one entire ending. And all in all, it's absolutely worth exploring the whole of Leyndell fully and acquiring / completing everything you need or want to do before progressing to the end of the game. Take it from someone who just killed Maliketh like he was any other boss in my first playthrough, it was seriously the most tragic thing ever. Especially after the many hours of toil and exploration, only now to be unable to complete certain things without starting a whole new playthrough. It's the same deal in fact over at Volcano Manor, with that entire questline too. There's a lot of quests we can get from this place, and it's arguably the most questy part of the entire game, with even map markers this time to indicate where we need to go to hunt down various other Tarnished on behalf of Tanith, Patches, and Recusant Bernal. And then there's also the Raya questline to complete around here too. Now, of course, hunting down our fellow Tarnished is one of the most morally questionable actions we can pursue in-game, especially the ones that actually aided us in battle before. But since it's the will of Rykard the Blasphemer to also do away with the Golden Order and replace it with his own, it's entirely in the interests of the manor to eliminate the Tarnished that may stand in their way. However, we cannot deny that to follow along with Rykard's crusade for a time will net us a ton of extra quests to complete, as well as so much unique extra gear, which even includes the infamous Raging Wolf armor set, unlocked after defeating Vargrim for Recusant Bernal. But again, like with Maliketh and Leyndell, the entirety of Volcano Manor's questlines will be shut down the moment we reach and defeat Lord Rykard. Therefore, if you care more about content and gear than fabricated game morals, Rykard 2 is a boss you want to hold off on for a good long while. Volcano Manor's quests will eventually take us up to the mountaintops of giants, and in fact, after completing the entire questline, Tanith will transport us directly to Rykard anyway, so we'll know when it's safe to face him. But really, they're the two main bosses that you don't want to kill immediately, with genuinely potentially playthrough ruining consequences if you do. Now, let me know in the comments how many of these things you guys did, or any more terrible decisions that you've made. And again, go to nordvpn.com/SamBram through my link down below. There's seriously so many benefits you get from one package, so just go have a gander. And as always, a huge thank you to my patrons for continually supporting the channel, enabling me to remain selective with sponsors and only promote the ones I genuinely really like. Thank you for watching, I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in the next one.